Hey friends, I'm the Zim. This is the Zim video. So recently I was able to sell a few of my tunnel books to artistbooks.com. They reached out to me and asked me for a little further information about the books. The questions they asked me were, why tunnel books? How did you come to make them? What did you hope to accomplish with this structure? Why have you moved on to other ways of expressing yourself creatively? And then what about you? How would you describe your artistic vision? What influences your art? How did you get to where you are now? What are your hopes for the future? So those are the questions I'm going to answer today. I'm going to kind of, I didn't tell them that I was going to make this a public answering. I did ask them if I could do a video for them instead of just typing it out. And then I thought, well, let me just use this as more content. For those of you that are not familiar with the tunnel book, and also starts to answer some of the questions. So this right here is the very first successful tunnel book I made. This one is not actually available for sale anywhere. I don't have it listed, I don't think, on my Etsy store or anywhere. But tunnel books are essentially, you take two-dimensional images and then you put them in a structure, like this accordion structure, and then you cut holes in them and you create a tunnel. And that's why they're called tunnel books. And in this case, this one's called Rome and Me. And the very back panel is me, my head, on top of a little doggy picture. But I went to Rome, Italy, a long time ago and made that tunnel book while I was there. So this one's in my private collection at this point. Maybe if somebody is interested in buying it, they can offer me a really good price for it and I might consider selling it to them. Otherwise, I have tons of other tunnel books on my Etsy profile. Most of them, almost all of them at this point, have bags that I've made with them, and I'll talk a little bit more about the bags as well during this kind of, explanation of the tunnel book. 4 that were sold to artistbooks.com were a tunnel book I did on Monster High. I'll put an image on the screen. A tunnel book I did of a burlesque troupe I was involved with back a long time ago. A tunnel book on the Fremont Outdoor Movies from Seattle, Washington. And a tunnel book on the SDS, San Diego State University Downtown Gallery. So those are the 4 that were purchased by artistbooks.com. And I get the impression that he's reselling these books potentially. And if he does, or maybe they're keeping them as their own private collection. I'm not sure what their plan is completely. But one thing that I do hope for them, that if they do sell them, I hope they can sell them for a crap ton. I don't care that I won't see any of the money for it, but I hope my reputation as an artist only grows so that the work that I've done that's now out there for everybody has will only be worth more and they can sell it and make some bank off of it. So let's make that happen. All right, to answer these questions, why tunnel books? How did you come to make them? That kind of combines together. So when I was an undergraduate at the University of Washington, I was in I have a degree in fiber arts, and during the program, we had what they called a book arts colloquium. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but one of the artists shared this technique of tunnel book making. And so at that time, I just was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But then when I got to Rome, and the one I showed you earlier, when I got to Italy, we had this assignment of doing an altered book or doing a sketchbook. And I don't like altered books. Like, altered books are, at this point, maybe the way that I've seen most altered books done. I don't like the fact that it kind of tends to make it kind of, it's kind of like, I don't know, how do I say it? You can't close the book anymore. You tend to alter the book in a way that makes it kind of just live in an unrefined manner. It just kind of has this chaos to it that I'm not really like that excited about. So I didn't want to do the altered book. So I focused on the sketchbook. So I did, it's buried. My sketchbook, I still have it. It's buried though. So I did the sketchbook, and then, but while I was in Italy, and those that know me now know that I'm a very prolific artist. If you're following me on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and places, you'll see that I'm posting my artwork all the time. And realizing as I look back on my life, this is not a new phenomenon for me. And so when I was in Rome, I was by far, there was a group of 26 of us, and sorry if any of you are watching this, but it's the truth. I was by far the most prolific artist while in Italy, because the put a lot of pressure on us to be artists, but it was the first time in my career as an artist, really, that I had just designated time, because I was an undergrad at the University of Washington, and I was working full time while I was an undergrad. So I really didn't have a lot of time to make art. And so when I was in Rome was the first time all I was doing was just art school. And we had our own little campus and we had our own spaces to work. So I spent a ton of time in the studio making work. I made a ton of work. And so I kind of finished my I was just kind of looking for opportunities to do more work. And so I thought, like, well, let me take this idea of an altar book and spin it kind of into something that I actually want to do. And remembering I had learned how to do these tunnel books. So I just went around Rome and found these postcards and kind of altered the postcards to make a tunnel book. So I kind of spun that kind of concept of an altar book to make a tunnel book. So that's where this came from. And I felt like this was the first highly successful tunnel book I made. I made another one, I think that my sister has from that time as well, but I still have this one. So that's where it started. What do I hope to accomplish from this structure? Why have you moved on? Okay, talking a little bit more. So then while I was, after graduating undergrad, I kind of shifted my focus from visual art back to music. Music was always my passion, my number one passion, and it probably still is deep inside of me. I haven't played music as much as I would have liked to, but it's been an interesting journey. I'll tell that story if somebody wants to hear it at another time. Hopefully I'll get interviewed and they'll research this and they'll see that and they'll be like, in that one video you mentioned something about music and you never finished. So we'll talk about music another time. But for now, why I wanted to do tunnel books and why I kept doing tunnel books, or why I have all these ones these, I don't know how many are here, but there's a ton of them here, was because I value, one of the things for me when it comes to making artwork is I don't think you can, define yourself as something unless you're actively doing it. And I valued defining myself as a visual artist as well as a musical artist. So that's why, I need to pick up my guitar sometimes and my saxophone so that I can still call myself a musician, because I haven't done it very much. But right now, during the time I was focused on music, I was, I value calling myself a visual artist. And I was like, how can I continue to do this practice of visual art? And because tunnel books are, small and they use, I use found objects, it allowed me the ability, there's another burlesque one that I made. It allowed me the ability to continue this practice of visual art in a sustainable way, I guess is a good way to put it. And so by working small, I could just keep them packed up. I have right to my left over here, I have a drawer full of just postcards and different things that I've collected through the years. And I just kind of, every once in a while, I'll pull a stack of something out and I'll cut it up and make it. And it doesn't take me very long to make one. So the combination and the economy of it, like it costs me almost nothing. I mean, every once in a while I got to buy a glue stick, but in terms of the actual materials to make it, everything in this box besides the glue and besides the buttons on the thing are all found objects. So I hardly had to pay anything. So it allowed me the ability to keep making within the constraints of space, because even now, as you see around me, this is my bedroom and studio. So space has always been an issue with making artwork. So making something like this small allows me the ability to keep making regardless of the environment. I can make this on my lap in my car if I need to. I don't need a lot of space to do it. So that was a big reason to do it. And so let me just talk a little bit about what the tunnel books are for me a little bit more. There's no specific question about this, but I wanted to mention this. So for me, the idea of a book oftentimes has to do with documentation and telling a story. And so all these books are of found things I've found in my travels, like where I've gone, things I've been involved with, and other things like that. So all these books tell a story about myself. And they're also oftentimes in the telling of that story, when the material that I use to bind them, and you can kind of see it there, The material I used to bind them are often also found objects and oftentimes maps of the area that I found these objects in. So it kind of tells this, it continues to tell the story, not only my story, but the story of the area where these were found and such. So that's a big part of the tunnel books, and why I make them and why they're important and what they mean to me. Okay, the last part that I haven't talked about yet is the bags. I mentioned earlier that I would tell you about the bags. So part of it is obviously giving them a safe kind of environment to be in, but the material of the bags is somewhat significant as well. Just continuing on with the story of who I am and having all these books tell my story in some way, and so do the bags, because the bags are made out of kite manufacturing material. I used to work for a kite manufacturer, and I just grabbed a bunch of I would take some of the material home and make these bags out of them. So that's sort of the story of the bags. And I like to sew, so it kind of harkens back to my fiber arts start as an undergrad. So that last question kind of answers, what did you hope to accomplish with the structure? Is kind of like that. It was kind of just a means to keep making with all the constraints, financial constraints, space constraints, dedication, time constraints. So money, space, and time. That actually does answer that pretty well. Okay, the next question is, why have you moved on to other ways of expressing yourself creativity? As you see around me, I went to graduate school recently. I recently graduated from San Diego State University School of Art and Design, studying under the graphic design program. But I do a lot of drawing. Like, I call these drawing. I use ink and a brush. So this is the style of work I'm doing now, is they're referencing. And why have I moved on? One of the main reasons I've moved on is because I've had visions of making tunnel books larger, but also running into that same idea of constraints of financial constraints and space constraints and things like that. Making a large, I could see like a tunnel book turning into like sort of like a theater, almost like a life-size exhibition type of thing. I could see that happening, but it's kind of overwhelming with still the constraints. Like, I don't have endless funds to do those things, and I like to work fast is another thing and so it would just slow down the process. So while I was in grad school, it was more important to me to just find ways to continually make work fast, and then also the encouragement to kind of work larger and different things. So the tunnel books just didn't fit really within the journey that I was on as a graduate student. However, the question implies that I've moved on from them. I still make them. I've made the last one I made was for my YouTube channel, just as a tutorial, but I still have a collection. I still think about them. I still have plans to make them. So they're not done. I still will be making more in the future. It's just that now I'm doing a lot of other things as well. And I can see turning my larger drawings into tunnel book type things. Like, if I take a photo of something like that in the background, I could see myself cutting out and making another tunnel book with that. And I actually did make a few. So one that I did while I was in graduate school, we got a prompt to do I forget what the prompt was, but this was a tunnel book I made, and I have a Cricut cutting machine, one of those Cricut maker machines, and I used that to cut out. So I'm thinking more about, I could use the Cricut to cut out, be more precise with designs and cut out my own ideas. This is just watercolor paper. This one I called Racism is a White Man's Problem. And it was a shell. I remember the prompt had to do with shells, and that's where something about shells. And so that's where this curved idea came from. I'll still do them. I did some larger pieces. I'll probably put a photo on the screen of something that was inspired by a tunnel book. It was called I Won't Be Afraid to Speak Against Racism, was one that inspired me to make something. But in the early days it was just, I found myself gravitated to drawing portraits is really what I'm kind of focused on now, is drawing portraits. So, all right, the next batch of questions. How would you describe your artistic vision? What are your what influences your art? How did you get to where you are now? What are your hopes for the future? So let's try to break that down into a couple of questions. How would you describe your artistic vision? I think my artistic vision and kind of my hopes for the future kind of are tied together. So let me wait on that. What are your influences, your art? What influence? Yeah, everything that I'm about to say ties together. How did you get to where you are now? And I've kind of already, so let's start with that one. How did I get to where I am now? That was kind of very much attached to going to graduate school. So I started in Seattle, Washington. I was heavily focused on music while doing these smaller tunnel books. When I moved to San Diego, California, I moved here because my ex-wife wanted to move and I wanted to be close to my kids. So we all moved. I just moved, I followed them essentially. They've since moved back to Washington. So now I'm going to be moving somewhere as well. But for the span that I was in San Diego, I was doing things like rideshare driving, as you can find on my channel. And I was just kind of trying to figure it out. I didn't have it in me to go back into the music thing. I was just kind of got burnt. I don't know if burnout's the right word, but kind of jaded, I lost my mojo in a lot of ways is one way I say. I kind of just lost my mojo for doing it. And with anything really, you have to do a lot of networking. You have to, especially anything in the arts, you really have to have a lot of self-motivated desire to do the thing. And I kind of lost that desire a little bit with music. Then I was just trying to figure out what I was going to do. Rideshare started to take its toll on my body. One of my passengers made this comment about going to graduate school for herself. And it just kind of planted the seed and reminded myself that, because before I moved to San Diego, I was actually planning to go back to graduate school for therapy, actually, because I didn't want to go to graduate school in my same city for the same thing I did my undergraduate work in. I just felt like it wouldn't, I've always had this thing about you shouldn't go to graduate school in the same city you went to your undergrad in. You should try to go somewhere else. And the universe kind of provided that for me. And it just reminded me, hey, I would go to graduate school for visual art if I could. And now that I'm in a new city, that one kind of piece that's important to me is already there for me. So let me just apply to the local colleges and see if I get in. And there's not a lot of art programs here. And I wanted to go to a Division I school, or that type of school, made that kind of university. So San Diego State University was not far from my house. I applied, I got in, and the rest is kind of history. But that's really that's what kind of kickstarted me where I'm at right now. And I had I think a very successful career as a graduate student, and some really cool things have happened since then. So that's what got us up to this moment right now. So what's my artistic vision? What influences my art, and what I hope for the future are all kind of tied together. Right now, as you can kind of see behind me, ban assault weapons now, trans rights are human rights. I'm very much inspired and influenced by the struggle for justice, the struggle for making the world a better place, the struggle for empathy, just the struggle to understand each other, to kind of understand we're all in this together. And so I want my work to make the world a better place. And so how I hope to do that is whenever I sell work, I want to donate to charities, because I believe the best way to make the best way in our society right now to make a difference is to vote for it or spend money on it. So I see my work in a lot of ways as protest artwork, and protesting only does so much. It only amplifies a message. It doesn't make actual change often. So the protests help inspire the pressure on the people around them to make policy changes in government and those ideas. So the protests themselves don't make the change. It's the protest that inspires the change. And so I want to be a part of that. I want my work to be protest work that helps inspire the change, and to amplify that ability for it to change is to actually put money toward it. So I want to get to the point where I'm selling my work for thousands, tens of thousands and more dollars, so that I can give back to these institutions that are trying to make a difference in the world. The one that's my primary place right now is Amnesty International, because a lot of work I've been doing lately has to do, it revolved around the topic of human rights. So I'm hoping that my work eventually will start selling for lots of money so that I can then give it back to institutions like Amnesty International, and at the same time allow myself a sustainable life so that I can continue to do this work. So that's what I hope for the future in a lot of ways. And and just to be candid about it, is my goal is to be a great American artist, to be considered in the canon of great American artists. So that's what I'm striving for, and that's what I'm going for. So hopefully one day my art will be seen as that. So that's what my hope for is for the future. I think that covers the questions. Obviously, there's so much more I could talk about with my artwork. If you have any more questions about it, feel free to ask me, either artistbooks.com. If you have more questions and want more details, happy to give it to you. If anybody else watching this has more questions and wants more details, feel free to jump in the comments and I'll let you know. And anybody else, and including, I'd love to do podcasts for people and talk about my artwork. I'd love to sell I have an Etsy shop that you can find linked below with a lot of my art, pretty much all my artwork. So yeah, I look forward to your continued support. Subscribe to my channel, and please reach out to me if you have any more questions. All right, thanks. As always, be loving, kind, and patient. Peace.